Angela, and I'm with Pfizer Rare Neurology Medical Affairs team. So I work with colleagues around the world at Pfizer who cover our rare disease area. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. And I understand that the theme of your meeting is rare disease. And so it's really an honor for us to spend some time with you all today. I just have just a few slides to help us. Okay, so we're going to go through some introductions first, and then we're going to talk about the career journey, my personal career journey. I know Megan's going to share hers later as well. I understand from Claudio in years past, it's really been a hit for the audience to interact with the speakers and understand, why is it we do what we do? What's our passion, and how did we end up where we are? And we're still all growing. So happy to share some of that with you all. Spend a little time about rare disease and understanding what is a rare disease and some of the challenges for patients with rare disease. And then close with some an idea of the power of language and why words matter, and specifically focused on rare disease. Okay. So you've met me already. I'm Angela, and I'm a pharmacist by training, and I've been with Pfizer for 20 years. As everybody says, I was a baby when I joined. And so a fun fact about me, I'm a huge Disney fan, and so much so my whole house is decorated with Disney decorations, and I even named my 3 cats Cinderella, their brother and sister, and then Lilo. I'm still waiting for Stitch, but my husband doesn't want us to have 4 cats, so I've just got Lilo. She's a loner. I'd like maybe if Megan could come off her mute and introduce herself.
Thanks, Angela. Hi, everyone. My name is Megan Gorski. I'm the Director of Pediatric Strategy and Execution in the Pediatric Center of Excellence at Pfizer. I've been with Pfizer about 2.5 years. I started just before the pandemic in late 2019. I live in Traverse City, Michigan, and I know there's some Michiganders in the office or in the room there. So yay, Michigan. I live in the northern part of Michigan where it gets very cold in the winter, but we have beautiful summers right by the lake. A fun fact about me is that I have 5 chickens and they lay different color eggs. So they have brown, blue, and white eggs, and they are named after the Golden Girls TV show, if you are familiar. So their names are Sophia, Blanche, Dorothy, Rose, and Goldie. So that's a little bit about me. And I think a lot of you know Claudio, but maybe we'll have him get up and say hi to all of you if you haven't met him yet.
I don't think I need to introduce myself, so you can do that.
You don't want to share your fun fact, Claudio?
Your fun fact, Claudio.
It's not that fun, but I've been working. I even published some books about music. There's a life outside Pfizer.
Yeah, I have to tell you that it was fun for me to learn about Megan and Claudio's fun fact as well. So I think even, we're in the work environment, we don't take time to really get to know each other at that level. So this has been fun for me as well. Thank you, Claudio. And thanks for being there in person, being our host in person. So just a few minutes I'd like to spend when I think about why do I do what I do? I am 55 years old, and I'm going to tell you right now, I'm still learning. And so if I have one message to share with you all, and I share this with my kids, I have an 18-year-old daughter and a 20-year-old son, and we're always learning. But I think the thing that really defines my career and my life story is getting out of my comfort zone. I can't see everybody's reaction, but hopefully you've heard of this term, getting out of your comfort zone. And so let's just spend just a few minutes. I hope that the builds work. Oh, yes. So, I'm home. You see my couch behind me. I'm very comfy here. I got my blanket. I got my 3 kitty cats around me. life is good, right? Things are cruising along. And I know in school or in life, everybody knows what I mean by your comfort zone. You're positive, things are comfortable, you're not feeling stressed or challenged in a bad way. Things are just cruising along. And that's a really good place to be. I think during, the past couple of years with the pandemic, I think many of us probably got tired of our comfort zone, right? Being at home and being locked away. But I think that's where, everybody gravitates to being that comfort zone. But walk with me for a few minutes and I want to share with you, we feel safe, we feel in control. If we start to venture out of our comfort zone, and I'll use the pandemic again, right? I'm so good to see people together live again, right? But there's that fear zone, am I going to be safe? What's going to happen? What's this fear of the unknown? Kind of have a lack of self-confidence. That maybe, depending on if you're venturing out, trying a new skill set, trying a new course at school, maybe, you'd be afraid of what other people might say if you fail. So it's not a very comfortable place to be. You might find excuses. You know what? I don't think I'm going to try that new skill set because I might fail. Or, I'm not feeling well today. Let me just get back into my comfort zone. I think we've all been there. But I think that where I've really learned and grown the most is when I get out of that fear zone. So I push myself through that fear zone. I'm like, I'm going to go, I'm going to keep going into the learning zone. And that's really where, you have to deal with challenging problems. And what can you learn when you face challenges? I always tell my kids, there is no failure. Because if you don't succeed in a goal that you've set, then you still learn something from that experience and you can take those learnings and you can apply them to your next experience. I have been unsuccessful so many times in my life and so many times in my career. And I think the key point that I've learned is to take those experiences and those lessons and take them on to the next career move, which I'll talk about that in just a few minutes. But, learning new skills is so important. It keeps you young. It keeps your mind healthy. It keeps things exciting for you. So you're getting out of that comfort zone. And then ultimately in that growth zone where I think, really trying to stay is in that growth mindset. What can I learn new today? What can I take home from this conference? One thing, you're not going to remember everything, but if there's one or two things that you can tell yourself, I'm going to take this home and I'm going to apply this, then you're in that growth zone. And that's really where I try to be. I'm not going to lie. I'm not always there. I love to be in my comfort zone. It's good to be comfortable, but I think when I really challenge myself, I want to live out my dreams. I want to find my purpose in life. And I'm still trying to find that, still setting new goals. And so I think when I look back on my career and this presentation today, I want to thank you for giving us time on the calendar because it's really helped me reflect and think about how I could help you all because I know that many of you are interested in science. You're starting out your journey in school and where you want to be in your career. And again, at middle age, I'm still trying to figure it out. So when I was young, like a lot of you in the audience, I thought, I like science. I like people. What can I do? I had no idea I wanted to be a pharmacist. And that's okay. So I scratched my head and I thought, well, maybe I'll try pharmacy. And so because it's a good mix of science and chemistry, which I loved, and working with people. Well, starting out as a pharmacist, and then my journey, which I'll share with you, ending up in pharmaceutical industry, really wasn't a career path when I was in pharmacy school that people took. Pharmacists worked at the hospital or they worked at the local neighborhood pharmacy. There really weren't many pharmacists working in pharmaceutical industry at that time, but things have changed. And I think the pharmacy opened up a lot of doors. And I think that whatever you choose to do in life, always think about how it can open. Is it opening more doors for you or are you closing doors? And always, whatever path you take, think about opening doors and making connections as you're doing by attending this conference, meeting people, getting out of your comfort zone. So I worked as a pharmacist in a hospital for about 5 years as psychiatric pharmacist, and I loved it. And I learned a lot from the patients, and I was really challenged by working with the patients. A lot of them had seen combat; they were in the Veterans Hospital, and it was just really meaningful work for me. And then I decided that I wanted to try pharmaceutical industry because it was a career opportunity that was becoming available for pharmacists. And I went back this morning and I counted. I've worked for 3 different pharmaceutical companies, in 25 years. And I've counted, I had 15 different bosses. That's a lot. And so when you think about maybe your grandparents or your parents, probably your grandparents or your great grandparents, they may have had one job their whole life and never left. Today's different. And I would challenge you all in the audience as you're getting out there, going to school and starting your career, it's okay to move around. You know, take what you're learning from this experience. Life is about experiences. Who would have ever thought I would have been in 25 years with 3 different pharmaceutical companies, 15 different bosses, many different therapeutic areas. I just recently started with the rare disease area at Pfizer just a couple of years ago. I've worked in psychiatry and neurology and women's health, many different, but every time I moved, I was opening doors, making connections, networking. And what could I learn? And was I scared? You bet. Always scared, always wanting to go back to my comfort zone. But I told myself, there's an opportunity, let me try. And what's the worst thing that could happen? I might fail, but I would learn. I would learn something that I could take to the next career move. The other thing I wanted to mention that's not on the slide is this idea of emotional intelligence. And I can't see the room, but hopefully you've heard of this. There's IQ. So you know your the IQ or EQ, looking at emotional intelligence. Maybe you've read some books on this or heard about it. This is basically the way that you interact with the world and thinking about your communication skills, the way you are in relationships, having empathy for others, listening, self control, self awareness. These skills are emotional intelligence. And if you haven't read about this, you might want to get a book and read about emotional intelligence because this is so important in our industry and a lot of industries now, and even getting into colleges, higher universities, studying that what you learn as far as the books and the science is so important, but that can be taught. That's something that companies can train you up on. But emotional intelligence and being able to react and relate to others and be aware of your surroundings is so important. And that's what a lot of companies, such as Pfizer, are looking for as we go through the interview process. And this is nothing new to the industry. A lot of different companies are looking at that. So I would encourage you maybe to get a book, read about emotional intelligence. And again, it's being self-aware, with good communication skills. So that's a bit about me and my journey. I hope that it's helped you a little bit. I think if I had to summarize, it's just don't be afraid to grow, to get off the couch. Me personally, literally get up out of my chair and take a chance, because I think when you take a chance, and this has proved very positive for me in my career, that's where I found new opportunities, made new friends, learned, and really felt like that I was giving back to the community and to the world by getting in that growth zone. So. And I wish I could see you all for your reactions, but hopefully that resonated. Let me see if I can get okay, next slide. So I want to shift gears and just talk about the theme for your meeting, which is rare disease. And that's the area that I work in at Pfizer. And you may not be aware that there are 7,000 known rare diseases in the world. I did a little search because I thought maybe I would give you some examples. And there's so many. I'm like, I don't even know where to start. But let me just give some that I thought might resonate with the audience, because you might know somebody with one of these rare diseases. Duchenne muscular dystrophy is the therapeutic area where I work at Pfizer. So Duchenne muscular dystrophy. Another one you may have heard of is hemophilia, cystic fibrosis, Huntington's disease. Some cancers are actually inherited rare diseases as well. Those are just a few, to name a few of the 7,000. Maybe you're affected by a rare disease in your family or yourself personally, or you know someone at school or at your place of worship or your community that suffers from a rare disease. I also wanted to mention that what does it mean to be classified as a rare disease? There's different definitions around the world. So in the U.S., the way that the FDA has defined a rare disease is if it impacts less than 200,000 people. So less than 200,000 people, then it's classified as a rare disease. Now, in the European Union, every country has different definitions, but the EU has decided that the definition is if it affects less than 1 in 2,000 people, then it's classified as a rare disease. Now, why is that important? Why do we care the classification of a rare disease? Well, it actually opens up a lot of doors for research funding, for focus on different treatments, potential treatments and therapies if something is categorized as a rare disease. And so I think it's important because you can imagine if you're only one of a few 100 people in the world that might be affected by this rare disease, it would be very challenging to get assistance, whether that be through help at home, through school, or study for potential therapeutic treatments, medications to treat your disease. So it's really important to think about rare diseases and how we can support rare diseases. So unfortunately, when we look at that 7,000 known rare diseases that I've shared with you, right now there's only treatments available for fewer than 5% of those rare diseases. So it's a huge, huge unmet need. Our patients living with rare disease definitely need the focus that we are trying to give them and the support with research and drug development. Sorry about that. I went the wrong way. I also, before we switch gears, I'd actually just taken a few notes that weren't on the slide. Just wanted to mention that most of the rare diseases that you might be familiar with, most of them are actually inherited and caused by mutations, sometimes in just a single gene. Some of them can be passed down from generation to generation. Others may not be passed down. They may be due to the environment or just a sporadic mutation that might occur, but many of them might be passed down. And so when we think about rare disease, it's because it is so rare, and that's a good word for it. I think it's important to think about what patients with rare disease might need, and how we can interact with our patients and people that you might know that have a rare disease, or in your family or yourself. I think that support is so important. So things such as helping with getting them on the right diagnosis pathway, and sometimes it takes years, as you might imagine, for them to be diagnosed with a rare disease, because it's so rare that the physicians in the primary care setting or their pediatricians might not be familiar with what's going on with this patient. So it may take a lot of referrals. I know for Duchenne, it may take 2.5, 3 years for a patient to even be diagnosed sometimes. And that can vary depending on what country and where you live in the world. Also, patients need help with mental health issues, and being able to get the support that they need in dealing with the challenges that they might face in the world because they are living with a rare disease. And there's, thank goodness, a lot of advocacy groups out there. And I would actually challenge you to get involved if you know someone with a rare disease and you're passionate about that. Get involved with a patient advocacy group. Volunteer your time. That's the best way to learn. You can never really have empathy. You can't walk in someone's shoes. You can try, but try to listen. I'd say more than anything, if you know someone affected with a rare disease, listen. Because you don't know, unless you're literally walking in their shoes or riding in their wheelchair, you don't know what they're going through. So get to know someone, listen, understand the challenges that they're facing, and maybe volunteer your time with a patient advocacy group to help with patients with rare disease. It's so important that our words do matter. And I think about when we're talking about rare disease, or if we're just talking about communication in general, words matter. And I've learned this the hard way so many times in my career and in my 50 plus years on this earth, that words do matter. And so I just want to share with you, just if I can get this thing to work and why, there we go. Okay, I had to click on it. I wish I could poll the audience, but how many times has someone said something to you, but that might not be what you hear? So someone says something, but you hear something completely different. Now, there's a lot of science behind this, and I'm not going to do a deep dive in science, but just at face value, I'm going to give you an example. I was thinking about this today. Sometimes when I wash the dishes, I don't do a great job. I'm quick with washing the dishes. I put a little detergent on there. It might still be a little bit greasy, but I put it in the drying rack. My husband is a neat freak and he doesn't like the way I wash the dishes. And so we've, over 30 years of marriage, we sometimes butt heads. So sometimes my husband will say to me, "Hey, let me wash the dishes tonight." Well, what I hear in my head is not, you know what, he's just trying to be nice and helpful, which is what you might think. What I hear in my head is, you know what, he really doesn't think I'm doing a good job washing the dishes. So again, I mean, that's a simple example, but I think it's so true. And I'm sure all of us have examples of someone saying something to us, but yet we're hearing something different. And there's so many things that come into play, such as language barriers. We've got folks in the audience from around the world. I'm speaking English. Thank goodness many of you do speak English and understand English. But even if we're speaking the same language, there's differences from where we live, cultural differences, diversity differences, experiences. So, Claudio may have a different life experience, than I do, or than Megan. And we might say something, but because of our different life experiences, we're hearing something different. And so, maybe my values are different, obviously, than other people's. And so when someone says something at face value, I may hear something different. The reason I bring this up is it's so important to think about and be mindful of what we're saying, and especially in rare disease. I mean, this is a life lesson, but I think we think about dealing with patients with rare disease. Again, we can never really understand what someone's going through. We can try and we can listen, but just to be mindful of the words that we use, and things just as simple as taking a step back and thinking about maybe using more positive words, maybe even asking them what words, what, how do you like to describe your disease? It's that simple. You think, oh, I don't want to ask someone because it might offend them. Actually, people actually appreciate it when you ask them, how do you like to describe what you're dealing with? That would help me. I just thought of another example, names and pronunciation of names. So many times around the world, we work in a global society. Everybody's name has a different pronunciation. And so even just at Pfizer, I don't know if Megan and Claudio are aware of this, but they've just asked, you can actually record the pronunciation of your name and put it on our site so that if I'm working with someone new in another country, I can listen to them pronounce their name so that when I meet with them, I know how they want their name to be pronounced. And I think it's beautiful because it really brings us closer together. And I think I tell my kids it's like the platinum rule: treat people the way that they want to be treated. And if you live your life by always thinking about how someone else wants to be treated, not how you think they want to be treated, because that's different. That's an assumption. But if you ask that person across the table from you, how do you want to be interacted with? What works for you? What words help describe, do you use to describe what your challenges are? I think that will help break down some of these barriers and why language is so important and a good reminder. Now, when we think about rare disease, I also want to bring up something that we're dealing with, and different companies are dealing with. And maybe you've given feedback on this before with different disease states. We often have graphics that we use, different cartoons when we have advertisements for studies or informed consent forms where we're trying to explain our study to families and to patients. And sometimes, again, that old adage of thinking about how you would describe something might be very different than what patients and how they would describe it. It'd be easy to say someone who's very brave and living with a rare disease, in my mind, I think they're very brave. And I might use those words. And I did use those words, and I've made that mistake. And I'll tell you, we were doing an advisory board for a group of parents, and they were describing what their challenges are with dealing with a certain disease state and their kids with rare disease. And listening to the parents describe their journey, my heart just went out to them. And I said something like, I can't imagine, you're just so brave. And one of the moms actually said to me, "We're not brave at all. We're just trying to get through the day." And and it was a real lesson for me not to use my thoughts and my words to describe what they were going through. And so for teenagers that are dealing with a rare disease, we might see them as very brave. And if that's the word they choose, that's fantastic. But the other thing we hear is, you know what? I'm a teenager. I'm 13, 14 years old. I don't want to be seen as brave. I want to blend in with my peers. I just want to go under the radar. I want to go to school just like everybody else and be accepted for who I am and not stand out. So I think these are just, I don't have an answer, but these are just things that we're challenged with in dealing with, working with families and patients with rare disease and making sure that we are very mindful of the words that we use, the graphics that we use, and really trying to make sure that we are listening to our patients. So in just a minute, I'm going to turn over to Megan because she's going to take over the second half of the presentation. But just to conclude my part, I hope that I'll be able to share with you a couple of things. Number one, don't be afraid to get out of your comfort zone. That's where the real growth happens, and that you can achieve your life goals by taking that step through the fear into the learning zone, up to the growth zone, and try to live your life as much as possible out of that comfort zone. And it's not going to feel comfortable at all, but when you look back over your life, all those experiences you've gained will help you continue to meet your goals and find new ones. And then also just, what does it mean to have a rare disease? The prevalence of rare disease in the world, and that we really have a huge unmet need. Hence, we continue to study and try to develop drugs to meet this unmet need. And then finally, just to be mindful of communication skills and the words that we use, and asking someone how they want to be communicated with. So that's the conclusion for my presentation. And at this point, I will turn it over to Megan.
Okay, so I am going to give a little talk about my career in clinical research. So you'll see some similarities in my talk as well as you did in Angela's. But I think I'm going to go into a bit more detail into how I didn't have a plan that looked like where I am now. And I'm also going to talk a little bit more about what we do at Pfizer in the Pediatric Center of Excellence. Oh, hopefully I can go to the next slide. There we go. So this image just really illustrates and sets the tone for my talk today. So my plans in my head for my career and for my life look like this straight line, right? I'm going to do this, and then next step is this, and then after that, I'm going to get to point B, and that's, where I want to be at the end. Well, but real life really looks like this squiggle. Sometimes you go backwards, sometimes you go forwards, you go up and down, and then you still get up to point B. But the path to get there is a little different than you might think. So when I was in high school, I loved the TV show CSI Miami. Now, I don't think that's been on the air for at least 10 years, but I think there's some derivative of CSI still out there. It's a crime scene show. Crime scene investigation is what CSI stands for. So it's a police drama where they really focus on science to catch bad guys. So, using DNA and analysis and other biological data that come from crime scenes to put all the pieces together. Well, I thought that sounded so cool to catch bad guys with science. So I decided that I was going to be a forensic scientist, and I was going to go to college and get a degree in biology, and then I was going to go to graduate school and get a master's degree in forensic science, and maybe I could even work at the FBI. Sounds really cool. But it looked a little bit different than that. Obviously, I'm not sitting before you today talking about how I'm a forensic scientist. So I applied to 9 colleges. I ended up going to the University of Colorado at Boulder, which how could I say no? It's a beautiful place. And when I got there, I was a major in molecular, cellular, and developmental biology. So, so about 3 weeks into that major, I decided that I didn't want to spend 4 years learning about cells. It just didn't seem as exciting to me. There was more that I wanted to do and more that I wanted to learn about. So I've already come to my first curve in that squiggly line, right? I'm already having to change my plan. If I don't major in molecular biology, what am I going to do next? What's going to be my career path? Oh, that option is out. So my college had implemented a new program called Integrative Physiology, which would basically gave you all of the prerequisites that you would need to go to medical school or nursing school or be a physical therapist or a physician's assistant. Really allowed you to kind of go lots of different directions in the healthcare field. And so I said, okay, I'm going to do that instead. And I had a lot of friends that were majoring in integrative physiology. So I said, I'll do that too. And I said, I'll just, I'll be a doctor. I'll go to medical school. So already I'm only a couple weeks into my college time at college right now. And I've already decided I'm going to be a forensic scientist, and then I'm going to be a doctor. And now I've moved on to being a doctor. So big change of plans really quick. But about into my 3rd year of college or my junior year of college, I was taking really hard classes like organic chemistry and physics. And it was very difficult. And I just was overwhelmed by that. And I thought, wow, this is hard. And after this, I would have to go to 4 years of medical school, first get into medical school, and then do a residency and a fellowship. And I'm going to be in school for a very long time. And what can I do that would get me out into the world a bit faster? So again, that option was crossed off the list. So then I thought, what can I do that's along the same lines, use my coursework that I've already gotten this far. And I decided, well, I'll be a nurse. That's a couple of extra years after school, and I'll still get to work in healthcare. So what do y'all think? Do you think I was went to nursing school? I did not. No, so I'm not a nurse. I did not go to nursing school. When I graduated, I ultimately did graduate. There's me on my graduation day and my super cool sunglasses. I hadn't applied to nursing school just yet. And I had a decision to make. I could either go home to my parents in just outside of Chicago, and I could live with mom and dad and figure out what I was going to do next. Or I could stay in Denver and find a job. And so I just started hunting for jobs on job sites and looked up things like research and science and healthcare. And I landed on an opportunity that I never thought I would find called a professional research assistant. So I decided to stay in Colorado. And I wound up working at the University of Colorado Anschutz Medical Campus, which is this big medical campus. It's actually even bigger now than it was back when I started in 2008, where there was a lot of opportunity for me. And I felt very fortunate to be hired immediately after college into this job as a research assistant. And I started working 2 days after my college graduation. And I didn't know very much about clinical research, but I learned a lot on the job. And I would go on to spend 11 years on this campus. I never thought about going back to nursing school. Well, maybe I thought about it a little bit, but I was enjoying doing. I really liked being in the field and doing the work that I'd always dreamed about, with working with patients, working with science, using my knowledge to make an impact in the world. So just a quick run through of the jobs that I held for those 11 years on that campus. I mentioned I was first a professional research assistant. So in that job, I enrolled patients in clinical studies about liver disease. And I also worked in a laboratory where I assisted with specimen processing, so taking blood samples or tissue samples from patients that had had liver transplants and preparing them for experiments in the laboratory. And that ultimately brought me into the opportunity of being a co-author on papers that were published in medical journals. So that was very exciting and something I never expected. Something else that happened that was wonderful when I was there, we worked with lots of patients who had a virus called hepatitis C. And at the time, the treatment for hepatitis C was very intense. It was almost like a chemotherapy that made you very sick, and it didn't work all the time. But when I left that position, there were medicines that were available that were able to cure hepatitis C. And so being in a field where you could see something go from one extreme to another, from no hope to so much hope, was extremely exciting for me. So I was sold that I wanted to be in research, but I was spending a lot more time in the laboratory, and I really wanted to work with people more often. So I moved on to a new opportunity at Children's Hospital in Colorado, which is right next door on that same campus. And there I had an opportunity to work on clinical trials where we enrolled kids with various medical conditions. So I could list them all, but it's a long list. Just some examples: headaches and migraines. We did some studies in Duchenne muscular dystrophy, a skin condition called epidermolysis bullosa, and atopic dermatitis is another skin condition I worked with, more commonly known as eczema. So I got this very wide variety of experience and exposure, and working with kids and helping those investigators with their trials. And I really loved it. Working at a children's hospital is probably one of the best things that ever happened to me in my life. I loved being there. I made lifelong friends who are pediatricians and advocates for kids. And I just loved that. And I still love that. And I still love that I get to be a part of making an impact for kids. So I continued to grow my career, opening more doors, just like Angela talked about. As I learned more and grew more, I was able to be a supervisor and supervised a team of clinical research coordinators. I had a large group of studies. I think at one point I oversaw about 80 studies that we were doing at the hospital in various areas. I also learned how to submit grants, to work with investigators to submit grants to federal funding sources in the United States, like the National Institute of Health. And then I had another opportunity to be a research operations manager, where I had a larger impact on the whole hospital. Again, supervising a team of regulatory coordinators that were responsible for ensuring we're following all the regulations in clinical research and submitting to our institutional review boards. But I was also responsible for study startup operations for the whole hospital. So every study, hundreds of studies that came through our hospital, were evaluated by me and others on my team for feasibility and assurance that we had the operational resources to do those studies, getting the contracts sorted out, and all of that administrative work. So again, I loved working at Children's Hospital. What are some of my favorite memories of my career are from being in that Children's Hospital. We had a lot of fun. Everything was always about the kids. And my favorite memories really are surrounding Halloween, where we would all dress up, all the different departments, and have a very spirited contest. And we would dance. We had like dance competitions in our Halloween costumes, and we did everything from Disney to Star Wars to The Wizard of Oz. So I love thinking back to those days and all the kids coming out of their hospital rooms to watch and join in on that fun. But as we know, life throws you curves. I came upon another curve in that squiggly line. I got married in 2017, and in 2018, I had this little guy. So this changed my life forever. And he was also in the NICU for 17 days. He was born about 6 weeks early at 34 weeks. And so that experience changed a lot for me, both personally and professionally, because on a personal level, I learned what it means to be a parent and have a sick child in the hospital, and how that feels to have strangers and doctors and nurses coming in and telling you about the status of your child and while they're there, and just wanting to go home and having to balance all of that with the rest of my life and my career. And so on a personal level, I learned so much. And then thinking professionally, it just had an impact that I wanted to do more for kids, that I wanted to be that I wanted to make more of an impact in the medical outcomes for children. So I, at the time, knew that I wanted to still work with kids in clinical research, but I also knew that I wanted to be home more because I had this little guy, and I didn't want to miss anything. So we moved to Michigan from Colorado in 2020. But just before that, in 2019, I moved on to Pfizer for a remote job that gives me quite a bit of flexibility and allows me to be around for all the moments with my little guy, who's now 3.5. Just about a month ago, had his last day of preschool, so you can see he's all grown up. And then I arrived at Pfizer in a position where I was a study startup project manager. I talked about how I worked in study startup at the hospital, and now I was kind of on the other side where I was working for a industry sponsor, and we worked with our hospitals and our investigators to ensure that our study was ready to go at their hospital. They had all their supplies, they had the drug or the vaccine that we were testing on site. They had everything they needed in place to do the study to bring in a patient tomorrow, which actually is there's quite a bit that goes into it. Lots of contracts and budgets and submissions to regulatories and authorities and IRBs. And so lots of moving pieces and lots of project management. But in a year and a half into that journey, another amazing opportunity came about, and that was to work in the Pediatric Center of Excellence, which is where I am today. So I will tell you a little bit about the Pediatric Center of Excellence, or as we call ourselves, the PED COE for short. So we are a group that's made up of pediatric experts. Some are doctors, like my friend Claudio there. Some are PhDs, and some are pharmacists like Angela, who have pediatric expertise and also can help bring together the combined expertise of other groups and people that we work with. So other experienced physicians and researchers and advocates for child health, and even parents, caregivers, and our pediatric patients, to ensure that we are optimizing and doing the best pediatric clinical trials that we can for kids. So that means everything from looking at study design and science and ensuring that we're running the best trials from that perspective, but also the operational aspects, ethical aspects of clinical trials in children. So specifically, what do? I provide that operational expertise as well, since I worked at a children's hospital for 7 years and am able to draw on that experience. I advise on consent and assent processes for children, also think about recruitment and other things that we can do to make our clinical trial experience the best for our kids. And then I also take a look internally at Pfizer and think of different things that we can do to improve pediatric clinical trials. What processes can we make better? And there's a very long list of projects I support internally, and there's several ongoing within our group in the PCOE, and I manage those. I also have the opportunity to collaborate with external groups, just like iCAN, with other groups like Children's Oncology Group as well, again, to build on those relationships and think about how we can all work together for kids. And I also help develop tools and resources that support clinical trials. So Angela talked a lot about, what kind of language we use and imagery do we use, and that's something that I like to do and think about as well. What kind of materials can we develop that help kids in clinical trials learn and help make them feel most comfortable? So I'm just going to share briefly an example of some of that we are working on right now. So these are some draft characters that we are working on currently to put into our clinical trial material. We've got different options like different cartoons and different shapes and animals. We also have different themes we're working on. So this is an ocean theme that could be implemented into our study materials. And we also have one that's a fairy tale theme, like with fairies and dragons and castles. And then we also are thinking about one on a futuristic world with robots and futuristic looking cities. So just thinking about things we can do to make materials more fun, engaging, and that really resonate with kids participating in clinical trial. And I'm showing you these because it's like kind of a teaser or a preview for what's to come, where we would love to work with a focus group with iCAN to get your feedback on our materials as we develop these at a later date. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you so much.